All right, so I haven't been on here for a while because I'm trying to find things that, well, I'm busy also, but trying to find things that intrigue me that I want to learn from regarding fitness. I think I found something. And also, I want to make sure that I have to do as little editing as possible because if I take my time editing, it's going to be something that's not worth working with anyways. If it's something that's timely. But this is not timely. This has been around for a while. Well, not this video, but I mean the concept and the person. And the person wrote several books on this topic, so I'm good with this. So, this is about Lyle McDonald, which I recently found out about him. I didn't know anything about him. And then sometimes I kind of drift off and then find someone. So, the personality is kind of, so is Greg Doucette. I'm not saying that I like Greg Doucette. It kind of wanes, goes up and down. I was interested in the video. Okay, so the video is fasted cardio useless? And I was listening to it, and I couldn't grasp it. So it was like, okay, I need to sit down and actually pay attention. Because I don't pay attention to videos. I play them in the background, and if there's something that piques my interest, I'll be like, oh, okay. And then I realized, okay, I gotta actually sit down and see what he's talking about. Because it sounds interesting, and it's something I need to concentrate on. So, I'm gonna have to edit anyways, because this video, it's a two-parter. I might just do the first parter. But what I'm gonna be doing is taking notes, because I actually want to know about this, what he has to say. I might edit that out where I'm actually taking the notes.
So it's been 6 weeks since I asked, are you really going to let Lyle McDonald train harder than you? And except for the 3 people who stepped up, apparently the answer is yes. In any case, maybe some more of you will step up. So in the meantime, I'm going to run a piece that I started last year and finally got to finish. I'm not done thumping on about the failure thing, but for now, this will be something.
Whatever.
I've been in the fitness industry a long time, online fitness industry, really since it started. And in recent years, I've watched it get kind of funny. The most recent issue being what I'm going to call the Instagrammatization of fitness, where people are only really able to communicate through short infographics and trite memes. Those infographics placing a primacy on being short, which means they cannot convey nuance. People just list these supposed absolute statements, usually a bunch of them, because that's all there's space for. The problem with this is the issue where things can become true by repetition, right? So someone makes up one of these things, a bunch of repeated statements, some of which may be right, some of which may be wrong, or some of which may be contextually right or wrong. Someone else assumes it's true and they repost it, and they repost it, and they tell 2 friends, and they tell 2 friends. Soon these ideas, whether true or not, become true by repetition. A good example of this is the old idea that we need 8-ounce glasses of water per day.
This is like only if people don't think for themselves. You're giving people not enough credit. Well, it depends. I mean, yeah, you got people who don't think. You got idiots. Doesn't have anything to do with anyone else. If someone can think for themselves, that's it. It's going to be a life of loneliness anyway. So, I mean, if you have a herd mentality, doesn't matter what it is.
Something that was basically made up in the early 20th century and has been repeated enough times that it's now true, even though it's not. Add to this another trend, and that's the issue of anecdotes. In one particular evidence-based group, anecdotes have now been declared to be evidence. Well, let's be honest. Their anecdotes are evidence. We all know full well that they would not accept an anecdote from someone they disagreed with. But even this seems to be context-specific, because apparently an idea that has decades of anecdotal support can be thrown out by a single paper, especially if that paper is by a particular member of that group. That paper comes out, and this anecdotal idea that they don't like is thrown out like the baby with the bathwater. Especially, they can get an infographic out of it. It's really a cute game that they play, right? Their anecdotes count until they don't count anymore, and then science counts. And science counts until it doesn't support what they're selling.
Yeah.
Like high-frequency training, right, Eric? It's convenient, and it sure makes it tough for them to ever lose an argument because they can just shift the goalposts like good little gurus.
I mean, with all this, I mean, my Instagram, I did have these infographics for a while just to have content going up, and some things piqued my interest, and then I stopped. You know, that's kind of human nature. You got to be open to something. At least I am. I'm open to something, and then when I see it's not working, it's not, you know, eventually my brain kicks in, and I'm like, no, this isn't right, or whatever, and I just stop doing it. But I think what he's implying is that people use it to make money, to get people on, to believe them, and to sell whatever they're trying to shill. We're all human beings, and we're flawed in some ways. So, I mean, you can't not believe someone until you see that there's something to not believe. You know, you can't be cynical all the time. You gotta have some openness.
Let me be clear. I'm not saying that I'm either for or against anecdotes per se, right? It would be nonsensical to throw out decades of experience, or even longer, or ideas that have been maintained, right? In some cases, they turn out to be true. There's some evidence that the old saw about feed a cold, starve a fever is true. But there's a lot of others, such as astrology, homeopathy, or traditional Chinese medicine that have been maintained for centuries that are not true, right? Even in the realm of bodybuilding, right? The whole thing of bro science. Many of the things the bros figured out by trial and error turned out to be true, but an equal number have turned out to be false. So it's not that anecdotes are good or bad. It has to be kept in mind that that's all they are. Because the plural of anecdote is not science. And that's why we do controlled science. Because, well, this seems to work for me, doesn't get it done. So what I'm saying about this and the evidence-based crew and their anecdotes is that they're being palpably hypocritical. Somehow their anecdotes are valid until their science is the final word when there's an anecdote they dislike. Or science is the final word until it doesn't point what they are selling, at which point you have to think outside the box. It's just a bunch of bullshit guru goal shifting. Pick one or pick the other, or just be honest and go, hey, fuck the science when it doesn't agree with me. I got an ebook to sell. I'd respect that. Which brings me to today's example on the topic of today's article, where a decades-old practice was thrown out based on the finding of one, but not really just one, direct study on the topic, which has now been immortalized by the trite, single, nuance-free Instagram statement that fasted cardio has no benefit for fat loss. One sentence, no context, no nuance, usually included with 7 other truths, or however it's being presented, which is being reposted by people who I am 1,000% sure have not read the singular paper this is being based on. They saw it posted by someone they took to be an expert, assumed it must be correct, and reposted it, and reposted it, and reposted it. And now it's considered true by repetition. But is it?
Well, this is just me. I don't think things are true. But there are trends, and people think something, and then they don't. You know what I mean? Doctors are like that until a new study comes out, until new information comes out. And so we're flawed by that. But you have to evolve. What you think now might not be the same of what you thought 6 months ago, a year ago. You know, everyone makes mistakes. If you wait till everything is perfect, then you never get anything done. You know what I mean? You gotta go with what you know at the time. But like I said, there's people who just follow the crowd.
So fasted cardio refers to the idea of doing aerobic activity first thing in the morning after an overnight fast. That is, not having eaten for some period of time, say 10 to 12 hours. Hence, fasted cardio. This is not a new idea. I couldn't tell you when it really became popular, right? When I first got into this, interested in this in the 80s, it was already sort of a accepted part of contest prep, and I have a feeling it was around before that. I know John Perillo recommended it widely, and that was in the 80s. And again, there may have been people advocating it before then. The big picture doesn't really matter. The point is that it's been around for decades. It's 40 years, used by God knows how many physique athletes to reach the lowest levels of leanness for their contest. Now, throughout the 1990s, at least into the 2000s, the idea of getting up, performing your morning hour of fasted cardio as part of your physique show prep was just set in stone. simply done as a matter of course. Nobody really questioned it. Boxers get up and do road work. Physique athletes get up and do an hour on the treadmill or whatever. Of course, in the late 2000s, high-intensity interval training took off, and I'm reasonably sure I was one of the first to write about it in my first book. And then everyone started doing intervals all the time, and they all burnt out. But up until that point, if you were contest dieting for a physique show, you got up, took your stimulants or fat burners, did your morning hour. Sometimes you did another hour in the evening at the end, towards the end of your prep. Wasn't really fasted, so not relevant, but it was just another accepted part of anecdotal contest prep. On that note, another one of those tried Instagram ideas is that if you are doing 2 hours of cardio during prep, it's wrong. No nuance, no context. This ignores that many smaller women reach a point where their calories are too low to reduce them any further, and that they might have to do 2 cardio sessions to maintain a deficit to get in shape. But these stupid fucking infographics can't provide even that level of context. Because even a second sentence provide them for putting 8 to 10 of these fucking things in a row so they can seem edgy. Not really related, but I believe Dante Trudel advocated morning fasted cardio during bulking phase, and I think Perilla did too. Try to limit fat gains. I don't think it did that much, honestly. It's better just keep calories under control. But literally nobody questioned fasted cardio for contest prep for decades. Just part of what you did. I would add that at some point, I think the 90s, this idea of fasted cardio sort of trickled out of the physique world into the general public, right? I don't remember when or who was really pushing this, although I want to say multimedia 2000s. I'm almost positive it was in Bill Phillips' Body for Life, but don't swear me to that. But in as much as people frequently hold up bodybuilder methods as the best way to lose fat because they get the leanest, there was some logic to adopting a practice that sure seemed to have helped for a bunch of decades. But then seemingly overnight, well, maybe not overnight, but at some point in the mid-2010s, I think, suddenly fasted cardio had no benefits for fat loss, not even potential benefits. An 8 to 10 item list of new fitness truths stated without context or nuance that was the case. But again, is it true? Final note. I'm only talking here about the impact of fasted cardio on fat loss. Whether it's better for adherence or what have you, while important, are not my focus. Right? If doing your hour fasted cardio first thing in the morning means it gets done and sets you up for the rest of the day, fantastic. Doing it later in the day is better for you? Fine. My only issue here is whether fasted cardio has any benefits or even potential benefits for fat loss. Because I'm me, I'll have to delve into some physiology first. So even though there's more steps in the process, you can break down the important steps in fat loss to the following 3. 1, mobilization. 2, transport. 3, oxidation. Mobilization is getting the fatty acid out of the fat cell, and it's the most important of the 3. This is all hormonally based. Insulin and the catecholamines play the primary roles, and simply insulin inhibits fat mobilization. Catecholamines generally increase it, and it's more complicated than I want to get into here. I'll spare you all the details. Cyclic AMP, ATGL, HSL, whatever. There are other hormones that play secondary roles: testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, growth hormone. There's also atrial natriuretic peptide, ANP, fat mobilizing hormone that works outside of the normal catecholamine pathway. It's first discovered in 2000. Pretty sure I was the first to talk about it. I had mentioned it in my Stubborn Fat Solution in 2008 and wrote an entire booklet on it and it alone. Like I said, mobilization is the key step because short of surgery or like cryolipolysis, you can't get the fatty acid out of the fat cell. You can't get rid of it or lose the fat. All right, once fatty acid is in the bloodstream, it has to be transported away from the the fat cell. If it doesn't, it'll just be stored back in the fat cell. It's called reesterification. Fun fact, women are better at this than men. The transport primarily has to do with blood flow through the area. If blood flow is good, transport is good. If blood flow is poor, transport will be poor. And I'll come back to this. Once the fatty acids are in the bloodstream, it has to be burned or oxidized for energy in one of tissues such as skeletal muscle, the heart, or organs. So a whole bunch more steps involving fatty acid transport proteins. Don't care. Eventually the fatty acid gets to the cell, gets to the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, where it is burned or oxidized, producing ATP for energy, CO2 and water, which are excreted. Now you have burned fat. Fatty acid previously stored in your fat cell is gone. Let me note that it is possible for fat cells to be mobilized for one area and stored in a different fat cell. Women's bodies are better at this than men's, and frequently they can mobilize upper body fat and store it in their lower body. Of course, to lose fat requires being in negative energy balance, or more specifically negative fat balance, so that you're burning more fat than you're storing, right? The above is just the physiology of how fat is taken from inside the fat cell and ultimately destroyed. But so long as the fat that has been mobilized and burned is not stored back within the same fat cell, it becomes smaller over time. So that's the process of fat loss. Why does this matter? So the general idea behind fasted cardio is that by doing it fasted, more fat will be used during exercise. Hence, it will hasten fat loss. Now, this is based on the premise that what you burn during exercise is most relevant for long-term fat loss. And contextually, this idea is false, right? The high-intensity interval training studies and other work shows that if you use more carbohydrate during exercise and deplete muscle glycogen, you tend to burn more fat the rest of the day. And clearly, the amount of fat you burn over the other 23 hours is likely to be more relevant than what you burn during that 1 hour. That alone would seem to say that there's no point in even writing this article and argue against fasted cardio. I'll get to why I still think there's a potential. Now, several rationales for fasted cardio have been given, and one of them is totally bogus. Specifically, you'll see it claim that fasted cardio burns more fat because muscle glycogen is depleted, but that doesn't happen. It takes about 3 to 4 days of zero carbs to deplete glycogen by 30 to 40%, even without training. Overnight, the effect is inconsequential. What you do see is that liver glycogen will be depleted as the stored carbohydrate will get broken down to maintain blood glucose. So after an overnight fast, you see this metabolic state where insulin is low, blood glucose is low, glucagon levels are up, not that it matters, growth hormone levels are increased, right? The low insulin takes the block off fatty acid mobilization, right? Even at resting levels, insulin inhibits fatty acid release from fat cells by about 50%, which it protects the body from excessive fatty acid release, right? So first thing in the morning, you have more fatty acids in the bloodstream, in the face of low blood glucose, and decreased insulin. Fun fact, the morning cortisol pulse helps to mobilize fatty acids for fuel. Cortisol isn't all bad. Now, in that situation, we know that there's going to be an increase in fatty acid burning due simply to availability, right? Up to a point, studies show that the percentage of fat used for fuel during cardio is higher when more fatty acids are available, and that will happen under fasted conditions more than when they've eaten. That aspect is not debatable, that the body will burn more fat in this fashion. The question comes whether or not this matters in terms of overall fat loss, or whether or not it even has the potential to enhance fat loss. The answer to that is a matter of context, like it always is. So I said in the introduction, one of the big problems with the Instagrammatization of fitness is that nuance and context can't be presented in these fucking infographics. You get 8 single absolute statements because that's the only way to fucking fit them all in. But whether or not fasted cardio might be beneficial depends on the context and the individual. The big aspect of whether or not it even has the potential to benefit depends on initial body fat percentage. Now, if you've read any of my recent books, you'll know that I set up diets according to some dieting categories. Let me note, values in this little image are non-DEXA, they're older methods, right? DEXA measures systematically higher by at least 3%. I don't exactly know why, maybe visceral fat. So these values should be adjusted up a little bit by about 3%, right? So the category male, this is 15% or lower, that's 18% or lower via DEXA. So the category 1 So lean dieter trying to get extremely lean. And this would include physique athletes or some high performance athletes. Category 2 is kind of the average individual. Those are average body fat percentages. And category 3 is the individual carrying a significant amount of body fat. Right now, I set diets up this way for a number of reasons. But the main one is that initial body fat percentage determines a ton of physiology. For example, leaner individuals are more likely to lose muscle mass when they diet than individuals with more fat. Heavy resistance training becomes that much more critical, as does increased protein intakes than for those carrying more body fat. Another fun fact, women on average have 10 to 12% more body fat than men, and they tend to lose less muscle than men when they diet. And at least one of the reasons is because they're starting at a higher body fat percentage. So if you took a female at 22% and a male at 22%, they would lose similar amounts of muscle. But if you're comparing a female at 22% and the equivalent male at 12%, the man will tend to lose more. At least to a first approximation. There's other, estrogen plays a role in this, and if you give men an estrogen patch, they will actually burn more fat during aerobic activity, sparing protein. A quick obvious note for the pedants who like to nitpick my shit. That chart, these are not discrete categories where if you go from 15 to 16% as the male, everything changes. It's a continuum. But I have to give cutoffs in a practical sense, so that's what I do. The point of this is that initial body fat percentage plays a huge role in all of this, which means that the potential benefits of any given dietary or training strategy will be impacted by that. So as an example, whether or not fasted cardio might have any potential benefits just might depend on their initial body fat percentage. Let me point out what should be obvious. The lean physique dieter who initially advocated for this would have been in my category